Welcome to the latest roundup of news and polls from Ipsos MORI. And our latest study with Imperial College has found that vaccinated people are 3 times less likely than unvaccinated people to test positive for the virus. The vaccines are working. We're also, those of us who are double vaccinated, have about a 60% reduced risk of infection. So the message remains from us and from many people: get vaccinated if you haven't already. And as the government considers now extending the vaccine offer to 16 and 17-year-olds, we found that 3/4 of British people think that it should actually be offered to everybody under 17, and actually 82% believe that people aged 16 to 17 should be offered it. So the general public, despite lots of protests from anti-vaxxers, is firmly behind extending vaccination. And generally what we found is that the public remain very cautious, and by some margin they believe that we need to do absolutely anything that is necessary to control the coronavirus, rather than just letting things rip and relaxing measures that are now doing more harm than good. There are nearly 3 in 10 people who just want to forget about the whole thing, but the majority continue, as they have throughout the pandemic, to be very, very cautious. And as a result of that, we saw that when the restrictions were lifted in mid-July, 6 out of 10 people in Britain thought that measures were being lifted too quickly. And in fact, what we're finding is that although there's talk in the media of a pandemic, most people, when they're pinged by the app, have said that they are going to self-isolate. They're doing what they're told. We've only got 18%, 19% who say that they're not. Perhaps because some of his recent troubles and lack of clarity sometimes about policy, Boris Johnson's popularity has fallen now. His vaccine bounce that he saw earlier this year has receded, and we've now got only 1 person in 4 who says they're favourable to him, and around half are unfavourable. And overall, when we look at the parties, basically it's a sort of toss-up between Labour and the Conservative Party in terms of how favourably regarded they are. Conservatives in some ways most polarising, and the Green Party, interestingly, by a very small margin, is now the most favourably regarded party in our polling. That doesn't mean to say that everybody's going to rush out and vote for them, because many people may think that they're well-intentioned, but you don't actually want them in office. But I thought that was interesting, that actually the Greens are doing far better, for example, in overall popularity than the Lib Dems, as we see, of course, floods, wildfires and amazing heat waves, in the more evidence yet that global warming is real and happening. We've also asked people this summer who they regard as the best role models in British society, and interestingly it's teachers, the NHS, doctors and nurses, and people in the armed forces. Half the British public think they themselves are the best role model, which I thought was quite fun. But of course the journalists, politicians, reality TV stars and social media influencers all come in for a fair amount of opprobrium. And I think that's quite telling. Interestingly, members of the royal family are sort of rather, not top of the tree. Only 46% think of them as great role models, but I guess we didn't ask about the Queen in particular, and we probably would have got different ratings if we had. So as we continue to argue in the media, at least, about culture wars, about populism, and as most people in Britain, when asked, say that British society is broken, it's interesting to compare Britain with other countries, because actually when we look across a whole range of measures, from a detailed survey, a global survey that we've done on populism in the last month, we've indexed all of that on the extent to which overall society is or isn't broken. And what's interesting is that when you look at a statement like "my country is in decline," the British are among the least likely globally to actually think that it is. We're down there with Germany and Canada, and a long way below Italy, Hungary, Argentina, Chile or Brazil. And so it's just perhaps worth reminding ourselves sometimes that things aren't necessarily quite as bad as we think they are. And in fact, as this chart shows, when you plot us out against other countries in terms of the measures of social progress gathered by the Social Progress Imperative Organisation in terms of environmental and the social needs of citizens, their welfare, and then what their citizens actually think, you can see that Britain actually isn't that far from Canada or Australia, and not even that far from Germany and the Netherlands, and a long way away from Peru, Colombia, Brazil, some of these other countries. And so perhaps we should just sometimes remember that things aren't quite as bad as they think they are. One thing that did come out in that research, though, was that we're least likely anywhere in the world to agree that referendums are a good way of settling political issues. We do have 45% who think they are, but that's the lowest figure anywhere in the world. So maybe we've learned something from recent experiences. Referendums are definitely more popular abroad. As we go into the autumn and as government starts to wonder about rising inflation, we found that a lot of people in Britain, over half, say they'll be worse off if inflation gets going and interest rates were to double. And of course, they're incredibly low, so they could easily double. And a lot of people would find bills a burden. And so this is a real challenge, I think, for the Bank of England as it sees inflation rising. Does it put up interest rates? But certainly there are a lot of people, as we end furlough and we end bans on evictions, etc., who will be considering their position. Also the pandemic's made people think about home ownership. And although a third of renters in our work for Nationwide Building Society say that the pandemic has made home ownership more important to them, 1 in 4 said that it's made it less likely they'll ever be able to buy their own home. And we already had 2/3 of renters saying they'd never be able to afford to buy their own home, despite most renters wanting to actually end renting and start home owning. And that's all for now. We've looked at exercise around the world and found the Dutch do more of it than anybody else. If you want to have a look at that for the World Economic Forum. And if you're interested in the challenges we face on obesity, where the public globally, 45% need to lose weight. Most people think they can do it by eating more healthily. Most don't want to hear that they have to actually eat less. Do have a look at the future of fat, sugar and the obesity crisis. A really interesting piece of work around the world. That's all for now. See you soon.